learning to extend compassion to those who are different from us. It means coming together despite our differences to imagine a better future for everyone. In Manitoba, peacemaking must also mean working towards reconciliation, an important task and a sacred responsibility. While Mennonites have not always been heavily involved in politics, nevertheless, as peace and justice seekers, we have long been committed to positive social change. And that is something we have in common with our speaker today. Wab Kinew is the leader of the Manitoba NDP, and he's running to be Manitoba's next premier. The reason you walk. He is also an honorary witness to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. Prior to politics, he worked as a journalist and in post-secondary education. Please help me welcome Wab Kinew.
Thank you very much, Harry. Thank you also to the Canadian Mennonite University community for welcoming us here today. How do you do? I'm Wab Kinew. And today I'm here to talk to you about crime, justice, and reconciliation. It's important for me to be here today in this place because it says something about who we are as Manitobans and about where we are as a province. This place, Canadian Mennonite University, is a place that was founded by the descendants of refugees fleeing religious persecution. And they created this progressive institution so that our youth could sharpen their minds and nourish their spirits. This area, where there lies a parcel of land only about a kilometer to the east of us, Nawiotena, Kapiong Barracks, in which the communities of Treaty 1 stand on the precipice of being able to realize a vision that has been dreamed of for generations: economic reconciliation. And also in this neighborhood, Tuxedo, a neighborhood like many others across the province, where families are worried about crime. In particular, where parents are worried about the impact that crime is having on our streets, on our property, and perhaps most importantly, on our kids. I know this because I know a family in this neighborhood who's gone through these worries in a very up-close, personal, and firsthand way. A good friend of mine, Jay, grew up not far from here in a very wealthy family. Jay is not Indigenous. His family are part of the Jewish community. Now, Jay is an athletic guy with the frame of a boxer. He has a big smile, a firm handshake, and he's really easy to get to know because he's outgoing and he loves to laugh. Now, Jay has a great sense of humor. He used to crack us up when we first started hanging out with stories about funny things that happened while he was traveling the world with his family over the years. And in more serious moments, he'd also talk about this family that he came from. He spoke about the resources that his parents had set aside for him, about the education that he'd received, about the opportunities that he was mulling over. At that moment in time, Jay was so full of potential. He was right on the cusp. But where I was able to move forward in life, something different happened for Jay. He got trapped in his addictions. He went from this area to downtown. He went from being around the doctors and lawyers to being around the drug traffickers. And he began to spiral, eventually hitting rock bottom. And when I say rock bottom, I mean rock bottom. All the promise and potential that he had, everything that his parents had invested in him, it all went out the window. This is what's happening in Manitoba today. And it feels like it's getting worse. And many of the numbers back that feeling up. Homicides are up. Violent crime is up. Robberies are up. And not just increasing, but increasing faster here than they are in other provinces. And just look at the situation with homelessness. Encampments and people living in bus shacks everywhere, not just downtown, but also in the suburbs, in rural Manitoba, bringing some very visible problems with them. Now, with things so bad on the crime and safety front, it might surprise you that Heather Stephenson and the PCs want this coming election to be about crime. Things feel worse than they've ever been. Many stats back that feeling up. And yet the PC government that has failed to prevent crime, failed to address crime, and in many cases whose decisions have made crime worse in our province, now wants to campaign on crime. Why is that? Well, I'm going to talk about this today because I think it's important that Manitobans see through my political opponents. I think it's important that they see through the big ad firms that they're working with. And I think it's important that you see what they're up to. The reason I think this is so important at this juncture in our province's history is because the PC's approach is offside with who Manitobans are today. And not only that, their approach will only make crime worse in our province. So why would the PCs, who've been so terrible on crime, want to talk about crime during this election? Well, first, it's because they don't understand the issue. Heather Stephenson cut many programs as the Attorney General, like a task force on gangs and another task force on high-risk warrants. And she, alongside Brian Pallister, closed institutions like the Dauphin Jail and Agassiz, also that they could cut costs. Now, in the run-up to this election, they want to say that they've replaced those cuts or to point the finger at another level of government for their own failures to keep you safe. My political opponents are playing politics with crime. Not only have they allowed our communities to become less safe, they are also making many statements which are simply untrue. I will never defund the police. On the contrary, I will work with law enforcement in Winnipeg, in rural Manitoba, and on reserve to ensure that they have the resources to make our communities safer, with a specific focus on stopping violent crime and drug trafficking. I support tougher bail measures, including common sense bail reform that will keep you safe, that will hold people who do bad things accountable, and most importantly, bring about a bail system in Manitoba that protects our communities. My opponents know these facts, but they keep repeating things that aren't true because they think if they blow that whistle, they can scare you into voting for them. But I have more faith in you than that. Now, I want to be clear here. Race is part of the landscape when it comes to public safety in Manitoba. That means Indigenous people come up in our conversations about crime in this province. And we all know the stats about the overrepresentation in jails and in the courts. But there is something that is lost in the conversation my opponents want to have about public safety in Manitoba. And it's a simple truth. Far too often in our province, Indigenous people are the victims of crime. And so do you want to know who wants real action and not rhetoric when it comes to crime and public safety in Manitoba? Indigenous people. Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people want to be free from violence. Indigenous elders want to be free from having their money and medication stolen. And Indigenous people from all walks of life want to be free from this damned drug epidemic that is tearing our families apart and robbing us of our loved ones. And in these ways, Indigenous Manitobans are just like everyone else in this province. We all know that we need to do something about the impact that drugs are having in our communities. So what have the Conservatives done in the face of a crime wave that is fueled by drugs? Well, they've cracked down on the people who are addicted. They forced them into bus shacks and under bridges, and they've done this by refusing to pursue real harm reduction approaches to dealing with the problem and instead underfunding addiction services and prevention. At the same time, meanwhile, what have the Conservatives done to the drug traffickers? Absolutely nothing. Where Heather Stephenson has been hard on people using drugs and soft on drug traffickers, I will bring the hammer down on drug dealers. And I will offer to people living in our communities with addictions a real chance to stay alive and find a path to recovery. One concrete step that we will take to crack down on drug trafficking will be to bring in an Unexplained Wealth Act, where there are gangsters with million-dollar homes and $100,000 cars right underneath the noses of this government today. Future Manitoba NDP government will ask, how did you get that? And if you can't explain it, we will hold you accountable. This will target those who are bringing toxic drugs into our communities and reduce the violent crimes that they cause. We are tough on crime. We are tough on the causes of crime. If you commit a violent crime in Manitoba, you deserve to face the consequences. If you bring drugs into our communities, you deserve to face the consequences. We have also learned that we have to be smarter about how we deliver justice in Manitoba. Here's the flaw with the PC approach. Let's say, just for argument's sake, that they managed to repair the cuts that they've made to law enforcement and they do bring people into the justice system. Under their approach, that person, once incarcerated, will be sexually assaulted, will be jumped into a gang, will potentially even murder somebody. And then we will turn them loose in small town Manitoba. We will release them into the suburbs. We will release them into neighborhoods like this one. We've seen too much of this in our province, and our opponents are only proposing to make it worse, where correctional facilities become gangster university, turning small-time offenders with addictions into hardened criminals. We have to do better in Manitoba. Yes, we need to ensure that we get someone off the street when they're doing something bad, but that's only the first step. From there, we need to address the trauma and addictions that are driving people to do bad things. And then we need to teach them how to live better. And perhaps most importantly, we need to show them the value of hard work and the benefits of a good job. And for the kids out there who are at risk of going down a bad path, we need to invest in the educational assistance and the meal programs at school and the recreation and cultural opportunities in the evening so that we can keep these young Manitobans on the straight and narrow. That is how we will keep you safe in Manitoba. And unlike our opponents, we will never underfund supports for schools, and we will never underfund supports for people with exceptional needs. That is a smarter way to be tough on crime. That is a smarter way to be tough on the causes of crime. Some of you may be hearing me speak these words and wonder about my own personal experience. I'm extraordinarily lucky. I've been blessed with opportunity, a good career, and a beautiful, thriving family. And I am forever grateful to this province and our country for that. You know, I sometimes say that I don't play the Lotto Max because I already feel like I won the lottery in terms of the family that I was born into. I am the son of a non-Indigenous mother and an Indigenous father. We had our share of ups and downs, but they taught me right from wrong. And they taught me the value of hard work. In spite of their best efforts, I got into trouble when I was young. I had a major problem with alcoholism, and I did some things that I'm not proud of. When I was in the problem 20 years ago, I was held accountable by the justice system. And I want to be perfectly clear here. Being held accountable by the justice system was a necessary step. It forced me to confront the fact that I needed to change my life, to apologize, and to tackle my addictions. However, I was also held accountable by my family and by my community. It was my mom in particular who told me she raised me better than that. And then my family and my community gave me the tools that I needed to succeed at a second chance. Culture, support groups, a good job, exercise. And I don't often talk about this part because I believe that I have a responsibility to lead in a secular environment. But at that time, when I was looking to change my life, I also had a profound spiritual experience in which I became aware of the presence of the Creator in my life. And so spirituality can help some of us as well. The many good things that have happened since: marrying my beautiful wife, Lisa, welcoming our children into the world, the opportunities that I spoke of, all of those things flowed from that, flowed from being held accountable, flowed from the second chance and the supports to succeed at it. So if people ask, Wab, why are you delivering a tough on crime message? What I would say in response to that is that tough love has been one of the best things that's ever happened to me. It was tough love from my mom in particular that was one of the biggest catalysts for me to make that change and grow as a person. It was that tough love right alongside the cultural supports and the accountability from my father. Those are the reasons that I am standing here today. And when I talk about the reason that I'm standing here today, let me be perfectly blunt. You do not know how many funerals I've been to for people my age, and people even younger. This life that I'm talking about, the life of a productive and positive member of our society that I'm saying I found through luck, our province can no longer leave to chance. We cannot run from the challenges to public safety in Manitoba, and there is no way around them. We have to work through them. So I'll pose my question of the day again. Why would Heather Stephenson and the PCs, who've been so terrible on crime, want to talk about crime during this election? Because it's not about crime. It's about me. And it's at least partially about the fact that I'm somebody who sometimes wears my hair in a braid. But I would say this: serving in the role that I've been serving in for the past 7 years has been the great honor of my life. And along the way, I've knocked on doors from Churchill to Altona. I've broken bread with people in every part of this province. And I can tell you this: our political opponents do not understand who Manitobans are today. And here's what I mean. It may be tempting to say that there are two Manitobas, each holding up a mirror to the other one and demanding better. Now, this way of thinking about Manitoba, it goes something like this. You know, it might be tempting to think that on one side, you have non-Indigenous people in Manitoba, holding up a mirror to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people and saying, yeah, we want Indigenous people to do well, but give up the crime, give up the addictions, give up the dependency. Under the same view, it might also be tempting to say that on the other side, you have Indigenous people who are holding up a mirror to the rest of society and saying that we want to be free from the intergenerational harms of this country's original sin, which is the residential school system, but who may be too quick to dismiss the good things about this country in the process. This is the approach that the PCs are peddling. This is the approach that their ad firms are trying to push on you, the people of Manitoba. It seeks to divide Manitobans and then to dodge the accusations of sowing the seeds of division by hiding behind the language and appearance of political correctness. The PCs are trying to throw the stone and then hide their hand. And they don't care if they break people apart in our communities in the process. This is what modern conservatives do. They don't want to solve crime. They want to campaign on it. But this approach is flawed. This approach is broken. And most importantly, this approach is morally bankrupt. Now, this approach that I'm talking about, this approach that our political opponents are pursuing in the lead up to this year's vote, this approach is also not who Manitobans are today. Not after the unmarked graves in Kamloops and in Brandon. Not after Tina Fontaine. And not after years in this addictions crisis. Manitobans today, you are smart. You are compassionate. And you are invested in one another's futures. The Manitoba that I live in has Orange Shirt Day as one of the biggest days on the annual school calendar. The Manitoba that I live in is one where people stand and applaud for the land acknowledgement at the start of a Jets game, and then they cheer like mad for the home team. The Manitoba that I live in is one where each and every one of us lives with, works with, or is friends with somebody from another cultural community. Our opponents want to divide us. But there are not two Manitobas, one for Indigenous people, one for non-Indigenous people. There is only one Manitoba. And I wouldn't be running to be premier if I believed any different. I want to answer an attack that is being made outside of the media, on the doorstep, in private conversations. I want to be absolutely clear that I will be a premier for everybody in this province, from every cultural background, from every faith, non-believer and believer alike. I will lead for everybody. And if you need the proof, here's the proof. If I were to lead only for non-Indigenous Manitobans, I would be turning my back on my father. And if I were to lead only for Indigenous people, then I would be turning my back on my own mother. And that cannot be. I want to be a premier for all of us in this great province. I want to be a premier I want to be a premier for all of us, because all of us are here to stay. And so we have to live together. We have to work together. And when we're confronted by complex problems like stopping crime in a way that learns the lessons from our past so that we can do things better today, we have to work together. And so if we are to hold up our mirror to our province today, then let us hold this mirror up together and see who we are as one province. When I look in that mirror, what I see is one community. I see one community that is made up of the white Christian who feels great guilt at what happened in the residential school era, but who doesn't want to hear excuses about crime today. I see the Indigenous grandparent who experienced great trauma in their life, but doesn't worry about themselves, and instead only about the safety of their grandchildren. And I see the newcomer who loves Canada as a land of freedom and opportunity, and yet is trying to reconcile those things with the challenges that I am talking about today. All of these people want our healthcare system to improve. All of these people want life to get more affordable. And yes, all of these people want something done about crime. But these folks that I'm talking about, they also know that these problems cannot be solved by any of us alone. And these people that I'm talking about, they know that these problems will not be solved if we are divided when we try to tackle them. The only way that we can overcome these challenges is if we confront them together. At the start of the speech, I began by talking about Jay, a good friend of mine, a kid from a wealthy family, not too far from here, who was driven into some very bad things. Even though Jay comes from this world that you see in the big homes in Tuxedo, I was pleasantly surprised to run into him earlier this year at a powwow. He was volunteering there. As we got to talking, he told me about some of the tough times that he'd had. But he brightened up and he got happy when he talked about how he'd turned things around. Turns out he got away from being in the problem long enough so that he could get to treatment. And while in treatment, even though he was non-Indigenous, he connected with Indigenous culture. And it's helping him. He's finding healing. There are no barriers between cultures when you're looking to turn your life around. You will accept help from anyone willing to extend their hand. And that is true, no matter which cultural community you come from. Jay's got a long way to go, but I know he can succeed. I know he can succeed at walking a better path. I know that he can do it because I've done it. And so this year, an election year in Manitoba, our political opponents want you to think that I'm running from my past. But actually, my past is the reason that I'm running. I'm running because I know that an individual can find a way to walk a better road. And I'm running because I know that if an individual can find a way to walk a better road, then our province, the great province of Manitoba, can do that too. And we need change for the better. We're making you safe with a strong response to the problems of crime and addictions in our community that learns the lessons of the past and reflects who we are as Manitobans today, that is the path forward. The Manitoba NDP approach is a smarter way to be tough on crime. It's a smarter way to be tough on the causes of crime. And most importantly, it's one that matches the values of the people of Manitoba today. And so today, in this place, I am appealing to your better angels. Because I know that we can make our communities safer for everyone. And I know that we can make life better together.
Midwest. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wab, for your presentation. The people have spoken their thank you with their applause. And I thank you all for coming. We will now go to the back to the foyer where there will be a beverage and lots of discussion. That is all up to you. Thanks again for coming, and please have a wonderful day.